North-South Connection. It is WrestleMania season. It is time for another NoSo Countdown series. JT and my partner on WWE WAR, Wrestling Above Replacement, right here on North-South Connection every other Thursday. My man Marcus, how are you?
I'm good, man. I got some sweats. I got some hives maybe breaking out. It's WrestleMania season, and I've got the fever in full effect.
And we have a lot of content WrestleMania-wise here at the NoSo. This countdown here, we are ranked the 40 best WrestleMania performers of all time. And each installment's going to have 3. So you get this one, then you get 39 and 38. That's one video, and then so on from there. Big thanks to Ryan Gray for assembling all this and putting it together. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and we get to kick it all off, Marcus. And we start with number 40, and that is Bobby Lashley.
We love you, Bobby. We love you, Bobby.
And all right, let's just start with this, Marcus. Give me your first Mania memory that comes to mind. You think Bobby Lashley, WrestleMania?
Him climbing the ladders really slowly at WrestleMania 22.
Do we love Bobby? Do we love Bobby?
I think of that. I mean, it sucks because it's Lashley. It's not really a Lashley thing, but when I think Lashley at Mania, when Ryan asked if we wanted to do Lashley, that's the first thing that pops to your head is just him and Trump. And, Trump calling him Bobby Lindsay. We love you, Bobby.
I want great. You to do a number on them, baby.
Like stuff like that.
Strong,
that's the first thing you think of. And you named the ladder thing. I don't know. Do you think that was done on purpose, or do you think he just really shouldn't have been in that match?
Just think he'd been wrestling for like a year and had no business in that match.
Yeah. I don't know why. That's what we're going to be covering WrestleMania 22 very soon on WAR on our podcast. But I think that's one slip up on an otherwise nearly flawless Mania is they should have given Lashley like another squash on that show.
Yeah.
Maybe in place of Boogeyman or whatever, maybe squash his Booker or something, and then just have someone else in the Money in the Bank. And you could have easily covered for him there. Instead, you exposed him a bit. He had looked super strong leading into that. You kind of made him look a little weak. So I'd say this one's misleading, and you can see the stats on the screen, right, of his matches. What we're doing in the series is we're taking Dave Meltzer's rating. We're taking our buddy John Canton from the John Report over here as well. And then I think Ryan's mixing in some grades from myself, from Chad, from Aaron here at the NoSo. So you can see, I mean, by all metrics, that's like his best Mania match, probably, right? But it has very little to do with him. So I think it's a hard one to really give him the full, to say like, oh, well, that's his Bobby Lashley's best Mania match as part of this resume. It's an awesome match. It's a great Money in the Bank. Just a little bit, again, not as much to do with him. So let's zero in on WrestleMania 37 because I think that's his actual best match, and that's with Drew McIntyre for the WWF Championship or WWE Championship. That Mania is a great Mania. It's coming off of COVID. Everyone's feeling great. It's a really good vibe. And that match, I mean, I don't want to say it over-delivered because I think both guys are well-regarded, but Lashley had just kind of come back, a couple of years? Well, I guess he'd been back a few years at that point. He was a little bit lost in the beginning, right? Like they didn't really know how to present him at first. Then he kind of finds that gear, becomes a heel, and then takes off the almighty stuff. But I love that match. I think it's a great championship match at a Mania. And I would say that's definitely his best Mania work.
Yeah, without a doubt. It exceeded all expectations, I think. And I think the expectations were still pretty high for two beefy men slapping knees. I think you get the boost of it actually kicking off the show, being the first match back from COVID for the WWE Championship was huge. And I think the kind of like the surprising finish to have Lashley retain the title. I think everybody thought Drew was immediately going to get his moment as soon as we got people back inside of buildings. Still in the midst of COVID. But it was really cool actually to see Lashley get that moment as well. But the match is absolutely stellar. It is his best match on here. I'm inclined to go closer with Aaron, like 4.25 for me. But you can see it there on the chart, tick up by each guy. So for me, it's an all-time classic. For you too. It'd be
do we love Bobby? Do we love?
Yeah, I would say it's around there. I'd say 4.25 for me too. It's a great match and just a great vibe overall. The rest of his resume is a little up and down. You and I like the Finn Balor match, but it's a short match, right? It's only like 4 minutes, but it's kind of perfect for that Mania, what it needed at that point to have Finn go over him for the IC's belt late in the show. So to me, that wasn't like a ding against him. It's just the way they structured the match. I think they did a pretty good job with only 4 minutes to spare. 36, all right, my feelings on that Performance Center Mania. again, you can only do what you could do in that setting. Everyone was just figuring out how to work with the no fans, what it was going to look like. Are we all going to die, right? So everyone's trying to piece that together at that point. So again, I don't want to say hold it again. I don't want to hold it against him, right, in any way. And then Omos is fine too. Again, how much can you do? He was pretty green in that setting. It's quick. I don't know. He's got a weird resume for a guy that's always pretty well regarded and pushed. He's got the Trump, which is a big match. We should go back to it because we didn't talk about the match in the moment itself. I mean, it's like a real big deal. It was the highest grossing Mania forever. It was one of the biggest angles they had done. It's hard to look back now, right, after all the Trump stuff over the last decade or so. But at the time, it was a big get. Like The Apprentice was red hot. He was one of the biggest reality TV stars. Him and Vince going kind of at it with like two of the big, Playboy millionaires of the 80s, right? Like it was kind of, and even I shouldn't even say Trump, even the Vince stuff for the last couple of years, right? It's hard to sit here and laud it as an angle on a match, but at the time, it was a big deal.
No, it was a huge deal, and I think the pattern I'm seeing with Lashley is he performs as appropriate to what his match means to the card. That's what I'm really taking away here, and you mentioned it earlier, talking about WrestleMania 35 against Balor. Like he's a very unselfish worker, and that could hurt him in a ranking like this. But I try to reward a guy when you can see that. I mean, for a big match like the Battle of the Billionaires, that's before we're really expecting like all-time classics to meet with a big match. I think 3, I might go a tick higher. Haven't watched it in a little bit.
Done much in ring, like to your point, like as a guy that you expect to go in there. And Umaga was coming off, 5-star match with Cena, but to have a straight match with all the antics going around, right? And they're really kind of covering as much as they can for everything. So I think it's perfectly fine. It didn't need to be more than that because you have Trump and Vince fighting at ringside. You got the hair shaving. You got Austin in the ring. Like there's so many bells and whistles. They were never going to go out and have, a 5-star or even a 4+ star match. It just wasn't set up to be that. And it didn't need to be that. It was perfectly fine for what it was. And Lashley does his job. I mean, he's kind of a last minute sub anyway, right? It wasn't Sean supposed to be this. Ray was supposed to be there at one point. This whole thing got really shuffled around.
Yeah, I think it was Ray. Yeah,
he's kind of thrown in last second into the match. So it wasn't really a fit. He does feud with Vince after this, and at least it's some pretty good stuff with the ECW title. Trump and Lashley shaving. Yeah, you get do-rag Vince. Him shaving Vince's head is a big moment. So you look at this resume. If you just glance at this screen, you think it's maybe kind of soft. But you have an all-time WrestleMania moment that he's involved in, a great world title match. He's part of the Money in the Bank, which is one of the best Money in the Banks. And then the rest is kind of whatever. He has a couple other things. He's in the 21 pre-show Battle Royal, which is weird because he hadn't really debuted, I don't think, yet on TV. He also is the Andre the Giant winner at 39. Which wasn't on the pay-per-view, but they give him that. Feels like kind of he deserved better. Hopefully he gets better this year for 40. As we're recording this, there's not really anything announced yet with him.
When we get to that season of war, I think he'll be the guy that's left out in the cold come WrestleMania season.
Definitely possible. Yeah, a lot of I'd say more than once for sure. So is there anything that you would just take away that really hurt him here? Just one thing that like really kind of hurt the resume for you?
I would say probably the Al Black match is probably the one that under delivers a bit, but again, it's 2020. We're all just trying to stay alive. They entertained us. They put on a fine match in front of nobody, which was, in the can for weeks. So kind of wish, it clocks in, 2.5 or whatever. So,
to me, I think it's 38. I think they could have given him something better than Amos with that whole, and I'm not an Amos hater. I don't care. But you look at the Brock match a year later, I think it's like significantly better and it's not much longer. So I think, you could have had a better template from him to maybe carry him a bit. Amos a little bit greener at 38 than he's at 39. So fine. But again, I don't think it's even his fault to be put in that position. So that's probably the weak spot. And then maybe his underperformance in the Money in the Bank. He's not really a memorable part. If anything, he's the one detraction in that match. And again, it's not really his fault. I guess that's the story of his resume. It's like the stuff that doesn't click isn't really his fault. Like he only gets 4 minutes at 35. He's in the Performance Center. He's got a greenish shit Omos at 38. He shouldn't have been anywhere near that Money in the Bank at 22. So the stuff that he's given proper context and setup, he really crushed with the Trump thing and then the Drew match. So I think that's what stands out the most. Final takeaway for me, I'd say this is probably proper. Honestly, it probably overperformed a little bit. I think coming in, if I said, Marcus, name me the top 40 WrestleMania performers of all time, are you putting Lashley in? Would he jump to your mind?
No, I don't think so.
So we'll see how the rest of this countdown goes. Who the honorable mentions are, they got missed. We don't know yet. We'll see as we move forward. So maybe he's a little overheated. I don't think he's under. I don't think he should be any higher than this. I'll say that.
Yeah, big name to kick off the list, and looking forward to see who's next.
Yeah. We all love Bobby, so I'm fine with having him.
We all love Bobby.
For sure, we all love him. All right, be sure to check out the rest of this countdown. They're dropping regularly here in North South leading up to Mania. Also, subscribe to our TikTok at North South Connection, or right here on YouTube on Shorts. Ryan Gray and I are counting down every single WrestleMania match ever, all 402 of them. It's going to culminate on WrestleMania Saturday, so you don't want to miss this conclusion of that. We're also going to have a WrestleMania match-by-match preview series. We have all other great content, Marcus. Like I said, you and I, WWE WAR. It's a really super nerdy deep dive into every pay-per-view in company history, so check that out every other Thursday. Tons of great content. Just subscribe so you don't miss any of them. And we'll leave it to the man that was behind Mr. Lashley at WrestleMania 23.
We love you, Bobby. Do we love Bobby? Do we love Bobby?
All right, NoSo, welcome to the top 40 WrestleMania performers, and we're here at 39 with Eddie Guerrero. But before we get into that, let me introduce my lovely co-host for talking about Eddie Guerrero, Chrissy Tina. Chrissy, how we doing?
Hello, babies. How are you? Hello, Richie. How are you?
I'm doing phenomenal because not only am I talking to you, I'm talking about one of the greatest of all time, Eddie Guerrero. One of my personal favorites. I know one of your favorites as well. And when I talk about Eddie Guerrero at WrestleMania, what comes to mind first?
Emotion, like gut-wrenching, raw emotion. Eddie has been in a few Manias, hasn't been in enough, unfortunately. But in those main moments that he was able to have, it was just always something so eye-catching and spectacular and funny. And when the emotions were big, they were. When the comedic moments were big, they were. There hasn't been anyone like him before or after. So being here, being able to talk about him during Mania season, some of my favorite times of the year, talking about one of my favorite, if not my favorite wrestler of all time with one of my favorite people, it's a good place to be.
And let's go into Eddie Guerrero's WrestleMania just dialogue of just like all his matches. And the first thing that comes to mind, it's a wide variety of different opponents and just match types too. And the first one that we have is Eddie with the Radicals, Perry Saturn, D. Malenko against Too Cool and China in a 6-person tag team match. And this was kind of the genesis of that Eddie Guerrero Latino Heat persona, but we didn't really see that yet. What are your thoughts about Eddie and his WrestleMania debut at WrestleMania 2000? Do you think this was a good spot for him? Did you think he could get a little bit of a better spot? What do you think?
I mean, at this point, I feel like Eddie was still a little bit kind of an unknown factor, both to people who weren't familiar with him in WWF at the time. They were coming from WCW. It's Eddie Guerrero and the Radicals. We know of them solely from there, but WWE never admitted that WCW existed. So you're going into Eddie fresh as a fan. So with what the match was for the time it was held, I think it was a solid match. A little bit comedic, maybe a little bit too joshy in certain points, but you can't deny that Eddie's a talent. Eddie could carry a bucket of water with no handle if he had to. Like, that's how good he was. But if we're going to go based in terms of what he was capable of doing, it wasn't the best, unfortunately.
And of course, he was coming off a elbow injury as well. He injured his elbow in his first WWE match. And in this match, actually, China had a wardrobe malfunction, so they had to work around that. And the final star rating, if people care about that, is 2.5 by Meltzer, 2.25 by Canton, and 2.5 by Ryan, with an average of 2.42. So it's a nice match. It was a good opener for WrestleMania 2000, a WrestleMania that has its ups and downs, as we know, with certain match results and just certain matches in general. But we're going to fast forward a little bit more to the next year of WrestleMania 17, and it's Test defending the European Championship against Eddie Guerrero. Now, with this match in particular, it just seems someone hit the random name generator, and that's the match we got, which seems like to be the consensus of the build for WrestleMania 17. The only match that was really built to a grand scale was the main event, Rock versus Austin. Do you think this was a good idea of just having Eddie in a featured match, even though it wasn't built? Or did you think he kind of deserved to be in a different spot in the card, even though it is for a championship?
I mean, at this point, once again, it's just a year removed from from WrestleMania 16. So people are still kind of at this point getting acclimated to Eddie and his style. So for him to be on this side of the card, in this spot in the card, it's not super surprising for this time, especially for someone in like the cruiserweight building block. Like they weren't really pushing the lighter guys at this point either. And once again, as you said, the only match on that card that was built was Rock and Austin. So for him to be kind of in this random hodgepodge of other matches doesn't really make him any less. It doesn't make him any more. It puts him on par with everyone else at the time. Working with Test, from what I've gathered, especially from what I've heard from Mick Foley, is like working with a burning brick wall. Just nothing absorbs and nothing happens. So it was a decent match, and for it to be a decent match, working with someone who was kind of as stiff as Test, once again, allegedly, the fact that Eddie was able to get that kind of work out of him just goes to show who he was as a performer and who he was as a person. So, as I can see over here, as you said, for the ones that do care about star ratings, Meltzer 2.25, Canton 2.5, Gray 2.75, averaging out like 2.5. On a scale of 5, like that's still pretty decent for the time, especially given what Eddie had to work with and the spot he was on the card. But we all know that he was capable of more.
Yeah, especially because Test wasn't the most charismatic person at this time. And Eddie being on the WrestleMania card, and this is post Latino Heat, this is post China, this is him back with the Radicals, but the Radicals weren't really positioned as top performers. So him being in this position just goes to show the company did see value in him, but he still wasn't getting through that glass ceiling. So Eddie unfortunately gets released later that year, and then his next WrestleMania isn't until 2003 when he's back teaming with Chavo Guerrero as Los Guerreros against Rhino and Chris Benoit and Team Angle for the WWE SmackDown Tag Team Championships. Now, this is a completely different match than the other two. You know, still 6 people like his debut match, but it's a triple threat tag. Now, tags like this could be a giant cluster, and they only gave them not even 9 minutes, not even 10 minutes. And you're trying to showcase all your stuff, not only as yourself as an individual, but as a team as well. WrestleMania 19 is one of probably people's top 5 WrestleManias. Do you think this match gets overshadowed because of everything that was going on in that WrestleMania at that time?
Unfortunately so. It was a bigger roster, a bigger card. So where Los Guerreros, Team Angle, and Rhino and Chris Benoit landed on the card wasn't super beneficial to what they were trying to do, what they could be capable of doing. Because if you think about it, you're dealing with some of the best people of their time in their prime. Like right about now, I would pay money for an Eddie Guerrero Shelton Benjamin match just alone, let alone anything else. If certain people in this particular match didn't do what they did, I would mention them as well. But it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to showcase the capabilities of the gentlemen that were working in this match, including Eddie as well. Like Eddie can only do but so much. And I know that he probably did some of his best work with Chavo. It's like working with your best friend, like you know just naturally what the other person's going to do. And Eddie and Chavo have always had that dynamic where they could basically run a match silent and it would still go probably 12, 15 minutes and be 3 stars on the scale. So you can have as much talent in the world, but if you're kind of compressed, it gets stifled, unfortunately. And I think that's what happened in this particular Mania.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a running theme of Eddie Guerrero's WrestleMania matches thus far. If you see the 6-man, the match with Test, and this match in particular, under 10 minutes. And that's not really much of a showcase for somebody, especially when there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, with competitors and making sure everyone gets the decent amount of shine. As we said in the star ratings, 3 stars from Meltzer, 3 stars from Canton, and 3.5 from Ryan, with an average of 3.71. So it seems like little by little, Eddie Guerrero's matches are getting better and better and better. So he's doing a lot with his time. He's maximizing his minutes, even if he's given 30 seconds, or right here, he's only given 9 minutes. He's going to make the most out of it. But this is probably the match that everybody wants us to talk about the most, and that is Eddie Guerrero defending the WWE Championship against Kurt Angle. This was one of the 3 main events of WrestleMania 20, and it was pretty much my most anticipated match as a fan because I was a big SmackDown kid, and this was the storyline that was really leading the charge. And it's a very different position that Eddie's in because this is his first time really main eventing a pay-per-view other than the Brock Lesnar one, and it's at a WrestleMania against one of the greatest of all time, and he's practically helping carrying a brand that's been touted as the B show. So he had a lot to prove at this point in time. Now, with Eddie Guerrero having a stark contrast from being the tag guy one year to then being the main event guy the next year, do you think that was such a jarring contrast for fans to understand, or do you think Eddie by this point has earned that main event status?
Oh, absolutely. There's no way that Eddie Guerrero at this point in his career would be looked at oddly for being a main event superstar, for being a singles star. That's what Eddie was kind of always meant to be. Once again, he'd gone too soon, obviously. So the amount of things he could have done would have been amazing. But at this point, Eddie was hot. Eddie was hot fire. No one can take that away from him. This is probably my favorite WrestleMania match, and I say that wholeheartedly as a Shawn Michaels girl. This is probably my favorite WrestleMania match, just based off of the pride that was put into it, the emotion, the work, the writing that was put into it, how raw Eddie was just for the entire like duration of the work that was done between him and Angle, the work in ring that was done. You can't find, it's really hard to find quality of work like Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle in this timeline currently. And we have some amazing stars, both in WWE, AEW, multitudes of different promotions, amazing people that it's hard to find this level of work getting done nowadays, whether it be on a regular show or on a pay-per-view. And this match going 21 minutes is exactly what it needed. The stark contrast of his previous WrestleMania matches barely hitting the 10-minute mark to basically getting it doubled is the respect that both of these performers deserved, especially Eddie. Me personally, the star ratings needed to be higher, but people are going to pick what they want to pick. Mm-hmm. This is one of, if not one of my favorite, the favorite match. Just seeing how visceral Eddie's facial expressions and his movements were so methodical and thought out. It was just it was perfect for me, but I'm sure that someone's going to tell me otherwise. They always do.
Well, it was pretty much probably my favorite Eddie Guerrero finish of all time, with him undoing the boot because he was in the ankle lock, and then Kurt seeing that Eddie's undoing the boot, and then Kurt goes right for the ankle. Eddie kicks the boot off. Kurt's confused that the boot is in his hand, and then Eddie does the small package, grabs the ropes, 1, 2, 3. Perfect way for Eddie Guerrero to retain the WWE Championship at a WrestleMania. And like the star ratings, Meltzer gave it a 4, Ken 4.25, Ryan 4.25. Pretty much one of the best WrestleMania matches in this Ruthless Aggression era by far. And we're going to continue that with WrestleMania 21, which is unfortunately Eddie Guerrero's last WrestleMania, but it's a cool opener with his tag team championship partner, Rey Mysterio. And this is a little bit of the same but different when it comes to the match previous with Kurt Angle, because they gave Eddie and Rey the time, but unfortunately, I don't think this is one of their better matches. And Rey Mysterio goes on to say that it was due to him adjusting his mask every second because for whatever reason, his mask kept falling off because it was a custom mask. Where would you rank this as an Eddie Ray match, whether that's WWE, WCW, where would you rank it?
Unfortunately, as you said, this does have to go a little bit lower towards the bottom of the list. Not for any fault of either of the performers. As you said, there was an outside factor that affected the match, unfortunately, for Rey Mysterio, which in turn means that Eddie would also have to work around that. And these two could make, chicken salad out of chicken shit easily. It's not that difficult for these two gentlemen to do so. And in comparison to other WrestleMania matches, I'm sure that it would be higher on the list. But if we're speaking specifically Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, and their lineage, it would unfortunately have to fall to like the bottom 5 percentile of their work together.
It's good to see that they actually did get that one WrestleMania moment together. And it's the first time tag team championship partners actually faced off at a WrestleMania. So another little historic thing to add to the cap of Eddie Guerrero. But to average out all of Eddie Guerrero's star ratings, it is 3.15. Total matches 5, main events none, even though he was kind of like a co-main event, but still wasn't the last match on the show. One world title match being the WWE Championship match against Kurt Angle. All-time matches, one with that Kurt Angle match. And I think we kind of touched on it. You could add your thoughts, Chrissy, making his resume stronger. Honestly, just giving him more time to actually perform in that ring. Again, he had to share the ring with a lot of guys for 2 of his 5 WrestleMania matches, so it's hard to get that solo spotlight. And again, I think that really did hurt his performance as well. What do you think?
I mean, I absolutely agree, because if you think about it, for him to be averaged out at 3.15 with only 5 Mania matches, 2 of them being full-blown multi-man matches, and for him to still be at that number is incredibly impressive. There are people with longer pedigrees that wouldn't have that rating, that have had the chance to do more, but it's Eddie Guerrero. Of course, he's going to be absolutely astonishing. He was always able to work with others. He was able to lead a match. He was able to let someone else lead. And let is the very important word, because not everyone's willing to do that. And I always had a feeling that Eddie just understood that the overall importance of the match was the main thing, as opposed to just getting yourself over. And whoever worked with Eddie looked amazing, whether it be in backstage vignettes and comedy segments, in the ring. He was one of those special styles of athlete and performer that was able to hit it on all angles and just be perfection when he allowed himself to be great. But there was a lot of issues, as we know, with Eddie, where it kind of capped him a little bit. But in the time that we did have him and the amount of work and talent that he was able to show, I'm just grateful that we were even able to experience it.
He's definitely one of the most versatile performers in not only WWE, but professional wrestling history. And just going by his WrestleMania matches, just to see how different they are, really does encapsulate Eddie Guerrero, the performer. You could plug and push him anywhere on the card. He's going to deliver, at least to some degree, because none of these matches are categorically bad. The thing that hinders most of them the most is the lack of time. Again, only one goes over the 20-minute mark, and that being the Kurt Angle match, which probably does carry Eddie Guerrero's resume. And do you think 39 is a fair rating for Eddie Guerrero in this top 40 WrestleMania performers list?
I'm biased. I have favorites. I personally do not feel so. But if we're going based off of the rating system that we've gone off of, then unfortunately that is where he falls. No fault unto himself. He did incredible work with the pieces and scraps that he was given. Because let's be honest, a lot of his career wasn't him always being at the top. He had to scratch and claw to get to particular places. So with him even being able to be on this style of list where he's at is still fairly impressive. But in terms of the work that I knew he could do, that I wanted him to do, of course I would want him higher. He would be in the top 5. He's my Mount Rushmore. Absolutely he is. But for what this list is, absolutely, I feel 39 is a fair number.
All right. Now we just kind of wrapped up Eddie Guerrero's WrestleMania career. Chrissy, thank you for joining me. Please plug your stuff, and then we'll try to wrap this up a little bit.
Sounds good. My name is Chrissy Tina. You can find me at Chrissy Tina across all of my socials. I have a podcast that I do with my best friend in the world, James Stephen Beery, Wrestling with Friends. You can click the link in all of my bios and it will be there. I do work with amazing people such as Richie Mars and other amazing creators over on TikTok, where you can see my NXT Rewinds Saturdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And wrestling is just better with friends. Hence why I'm here with Richie.
I couldn't say it any better myself. And I'm Richie Mars. You can catch Wrestling Retold and Relive with Richie Mars on Tuesdays on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Please check out the episode I did with Chrissy if you enjoyed it right here. Unsung, the best of the WWE Divas period of time in the Attitude Era, Ruthless Aggression, the PG era till now. And I'm also on the TikTok, like Chrissy said, at Retold Richie Mars. New videos every day. Try to get 3 to 5 videos out there about the current WWE product. But again, this was number 39 on the best WrestleMania performers. Eddie Guerrero on the NoSo Countdown. We'll see you for number 38. TTFN, Tata for now.
Bye, babies.
Hey now, North-South Connection. It's WrestleMania season. Steve Bennett here with a new friend. We have settled all of the Italy-Australia 2006 drama and have created a partnership here. Demolition Dave, as he's going by to celebrate the occasion. What's going on, man? How is Australia?
Look, Australia is good. Australia is reveling in the amazingness of Elimination Chamber having been such a great event, and Rhea Ripley just, cementing her status as an Australian great. Look, she's going to go down as an Australian icon. It's clear and obvious. Us Australians, we love our icons, and there's no doubt Rhea Ripley will be one of them now that she won the main event down here. But that's Elimination Chamber season.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I prefer Neil Finn. I don't know anything about Rhea Ripley, but sounds like she did great. I'm very, very proud of her, as they say. I first met Dave. I was scrolling through Reels, and he got out of his car and approached a kangaroo that was attacking a dog, and he punched it in the face, and the kangaroo ran off. I saw that video. That was the first time I seen Dave. That was you, right?
No, yeah. Look, I love the good fight with the kangaroo.
Yeah, the fight with the kangaroo. It's nice. Dave represents all Australians in this video right now.
That's it. That's it.
He is in Sydney. He's sitting on the steps of the famous Opera House as we record this video. Let's get into it. Demolition, 38. First of all, just when you hear 38, what do you think? Fair, unfair? Would you think higher? Would you think lower? What do you think about 38? We didn't come up with the list. We're just here to talk about Demolition's spot on it. What do you think about 38?
Look, I think it's fair when you take into account that they only have 4 WrestleMania matches, one of them being one we don't really care about. So, look, I think it is a fair reflection that for a team that only have 4 matches, you wouldn't think they'd be too much higher, but I do believe this is a team that needs to be on this list. They are the first team in company history to ever appear in 3 World Tag Team title matches. Since Demolition ended as a team, only 4 other teams have ever done that, and Demolition are the only team to have won 3 World Tag Team title matches at WrestleMania. So that's a pretty impressive feat. And when you consider they competed at a time when tag teams weren't given that prominent position at WrestleMania per se, Demolition have a very, very solid place in what they achieved at WrestleMania, how they achieved it, and I think that warrants them a position on this list.
Yeah, and I think too that at the beginning of the WrestleMania era, in WrestleMania 1, that's the first ever title change in WrestleMania history, is the tag match between the U.S. Express and Sheik and Volkov. So they sort of set the tone. A tag team match sets the tone for big things will happen at this event, right?
Absolutely.
Then WrestleMania 2, the Bulldogs are, although not necessarily the main event of Chicago, they go on last at Chicago and win the belt in a moment that Gorilla Monsoon talked about. As long as they and Dream Team were in the
company,
right?
yeah.
The nightmare of the Dream Team nightmare at the Rosemont. I mean, we heard about it for years.
Yes.
Then at WrestleMania 3, you have not a tag match, but the tag team champions being involved in a big 6-man around one of the biggest angles around WrestleMania 3 and the Danny Davis cheating scandal and eventual suspension by President Jack Tunney. And then we get to the Demolition era in 4, 5, and 6. And you could argue that in 4 and 6 and close in 5, they have the biggest pop of the night, the biggest reaction to the bell at 4. In a night when there's not many reactions, I think they get, and the second last match, right? This is not, it's not the hot crowd. This is a crowd that's went through 4 hours now, been through the tournament.
Yeah.
You're well into VHS tape number 2 at this point, right? And you get a huge reaction. I was at WrestleMania 6 as a 10-year-old, and when they got that pin, I'll tell you, the whole Sky Dome, it was the loudest it was all night, because you have to remember the main event that night, it was a split reaction at the end. There was kids like me crying because Hulk lost, and then people cheering because Warrior won. So it's undoubtable that they got the biggest pop then. And I think it's their reaction at WrestleMania that leads them between 4 and 5 to become faces too. What do you think about their role in terms of carrying what, although maybe not prominent position in terms of, oh, this is going to be the main event. The tone was set early at WrestleMania that tag matches would be on the card and important things could happen. Yeah,
absolutely. Like you said, tag team matches were always prominent, and title changes, like you said, the US Express, the British Bulldogs both had their key moments, in their matches. But Demolition's arrival at WrestleMania 4 just seems to change the landscape of the tag team division and the way the tag team is viewed. Because prior to Demolition, tag teams were really middle of the card, maybe on the house show circuit, they'd main event a match, but they were never viewed as prominent storytelling mechanisms. Even the Bulldogs Heart Foundation storyline, it revolved around Danny Davis, and Danny Davis was the storyline keyed in with Tito and Macho Man, and like there were other factors. The Bulldogs and Hearts were just part of that. But when it came to Demolition, they became a key focus for 3 years. As you said, WrestleMania 4, they might not have been the main event, but they were one of the few advertised matches. But like you said, they brought the crowd. The crowd came to life when this match happened. Demolition Strike Force woke the crowd up from their They pretty well WWF put everyone to sleep with that tournament.
Yep.
Demolition woke them up, and look, I mean, and as it was, got a reaction that no one was expecting. They were cheered. Got this massive, great positive reaction to winning the titles in a match that,
even though they cheated, even though they were
in
the match, right?
They did. They used the cane.
Yeah.
But I think you could argue that this match is probably the best match on the card in terms of in-ring product. That is probably the best match on the card at WrestleMania 4 is this tag team title match. Then they move on to 5. And while the match it might have been probably the 3rd or 4th biggest build in that WrestleMania 5, behind the other 2 title matches.
Yep.
The only other match that could rival in build would be maybe Andre Jake.
Andre Jake, yeah.
Yeah, but this was the big match, and this is the story that turned them face. The Mr. Fuji thing, it was a prominent, and
which
again,
I've always defended. I've always defended people who don't understand it. I get it. But another thing I think, too, is we see after the huge reaction at 4, look at how many tag matches are on the card at 5, too.
Yes.
Compared, I think the whole division got elevated. And they're at the top of that. When tag team wrestling was most important in the company, it was Demolition that was the team that was at the top of the ladder.
At the top of the cap.
Of course, the Bulldogs and the Hearts and the Brainbusters, the Rockers, several emerged. But it was most important then, maybe even at WrestleMania 5, when you have several tag team matches that night. With not just like this guy and this guy versus this guy and this guy, but with actual tag team versus tag team. I have a question for you I wanted to ask you. We're probably about the same age. I'm 43. I don't know exactly how old you are, but I'm curious.
48.
Okay, a little older, but about the same.
Yeah.
What was, because I don't know, and maybe a lot of the viewers don't know, what was it like to watch a WrestleMania in Australia in 1987, 88, 89, 90? Like, what do you remember about watching these matches as a kid and what it was like, because here the pay-per-view landscape was changing quickly. You know, WrestleMania 3, we had to go get a special box. You know, WrestleMania 4, we didn't. You know, WrestleMania 5, I watched with my friends who had like a scrambler. But I'm just curious to get the perspective of what it was like internationally to watch WrestleMania in the era of Demolition.
In Australia, for WrestleMania 4 and WrestleMania 5 and pre-WrestleMania 3, these events were on free-to-air television. We had ads streamed through the show.
Yeah,
because we didn't have cable or pay television until the late 1990s. So everything was free to air. But in basically not long after WrestleMania, just after SummerSlam 89 and Royal Rumble 90, the network televisions lost the rights to show wrestling. It wasn't on anymore, and we had to go. Everything happened via the VHS, so we had to wait for the tapes to come out.
Tape trading, yeah.
And the flip on that was we got all the magazines that came over. Well, there was a 3-month delay, so we didn't get the spoilers reading the magazines before the videos came out. They also came out at the same time, so it just felt like you were watching it in time with everything. Everything was always delayed getting over here, so we saw it on video, but we saw it. You wouldn't get spoilers. You wouldn't go have read magazines 2 months early and go, "Oh, I know what's going to happen."
So the famous like Hart Demolition 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia, you saw that in the fall, then?
Yeah, I would have seen that.
That was SummerSlam 90, right? So
yeah, we would have got the video in probably sort of November, just before Christmas.
Got it. Interesting. I was just curious about that. Did you have the same? Were there Australian specific announcers, or did you have Jesse and Gorilla?
No. Jesse and Gorilla. Grew up Jesse and Gorilla. Love
Got
them.
it. Let's talk a little bit about the star ratings because Ryan wants us to. Strike Force match, we got 2.5 from Meltzer. I'll be honest, I don't know who Canton is. He gave it 1 star, which is absurd.
That's a ridiculous rating.
Justin gave it 2.5. The average is 2. To me, it's easily a 3 to 3.5 star match. It was 8 minutes. It felt like 4. It had a good pace. It told a great story of strength versus speed. Commentary is amazing. You get a great finish and a huge pop. I'm about 3.5 here. Where do you fall?
Yeah, I agree. 3 to 3.5. Like I said, it's the match of the night at WrestleMania 4. The best match on the card. It just brings everyone to life. It's good in ring. It's quick paced. There's no real slow spots.
No.
And as we said, Demolition heels. They get a cheat to win, but it's what you expect at that time, and it was a real moment for them. So yeah, I agree. 3 to 3.5.
And it's a good mix of styles. Again, like can the speed of Strike Force outrun the strength of Demolition? And you had Jesse there to say no, they can't, and you had Gorilla there to say, well, maybe they can, and we found out they couldn't. The following year, again, some absolutely ridiculous grades here. Meltzer gives it a dud. I mean, a dud to me is like a house show match that's Jose Luis Rivera versus, someone under a hood, and they go 17 minutes because they know everyone's just walking in. I mean, this is not a dud. It's an absurd grade. Now,
it's another match that's actually quite well paced.
Yeah, really well paced.
And the storyline behind it with wanting to get Fuji in the ring. I mean, Gorilla and Jesse told that story so well. Fuji's the weak link. Jesse goes, I'm not denying that. Of course he is, but he's dangerous. He gets in, he gets beat. Demolition get the pin on him, and it's a great response, and it's a good finality to that storyline.
Yeah, and again, I think the story they're telling is Demolition was smart here. They knew they had a better chance with Fuji on the apron than below it. They got the match on their terms as champion in a match that basically Fuji handpicked, right? This is what Fuji wanted.
Yeah.
He wanted to control the powers of pain. He wanted to get the belts back from Demolition. And Demolition said, okay, but we want you in the match, not on the apron. And Fuji's ego got the best of him, and he got caught and pinned. I think that's a great story. Again, like, even Meltzer, although has admitted he was sort of trolling back in this era, he was bitter that WWF was not as open to him as the other promotions. I know he's particularly mad at the events that would go directly against the NWA events. To say it's a dud is ridiculous. 0.75 is ridiculous. 2, I guess, but again, you're just telling me you're grading it on essentially the gymnastics. You know, you're just looking at how was the fake fight. And even then I disagree. Even then I think it was better. You know, to me, it's again around 3. Probably not the peak of 3.5 that the last year was. More like a 3. That's why
I think what dings this match is the fact that it's, you know, Demolition were playing the brawler power game. That's what Warlord and Barbarian were bringing as a team.
The contrast isn't there,
yeah. There was no real difference there, so it was very one-dimensional sort of match.
Fair, that's fair, and that's why I think it is a little worse than the last year.
Yeah,
but it's not a dud.
No,
dud is absurd. Let's talk about WrestleMania 6, Toronto Skydome. I was there. Second match on the card. Andre the Giant and Haku are the champs. Demolition back in their WrestleMania 4 role as challengers. And we get 2 stars from Meltzer, 1 from Canton, who I believe is the owner of the Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. I don't know him beyond that. I think that's who he is. Justin, finally, with a sensible grade here of 3.5. It's at least that. Again, I was there, so I might be biased, but I can tell you that the pop that you see on TV is every bit as good as the arena. It was an incredible reaction. And then again, I think part of the grade personally should be the angle in the ring right after, where finally Andre has had enough of Bobby Heenan. And finally, after years as a crowd, we get to cheer Andre again. You know, and
absolutely,
admittedly, he misses the first slap, but Bobby doesn't sell it. Andre misses and Bobby doesn't sell it. So it was just a swing and a miss. That happens. And, and then he gets him he was trying to be gentle with Bobby because he did care for him, which is fine. But I think it's an amazing moment. I think it's the best of the 3. I would go 3.75 if you're doing quarters. If you're not, I'm fine with 3.5. And again, that's for the whole package. That's from the time they walk to the ring to the time they walk to the back.
And this, to me, this is the pinnacle of Demolition's run. And what people forget is the reason the pop and the reaction was so big is Demolition was so over. At this point, after Hogan and Warrior, they were probably the next biggest act in the company. Absolutely. Full stop, end of story. They were charismatic. They were good in the ring. They were well versed. They could actually vary their styles. Axe had a long history as being a ground worker, a mat worker. You know, Smash had come in. He had good history elsewhere. They were powerful guys, could work all sorts of matches. I think part of the key of this storyline is that I believe the company took the belts off Demolition with the intent of them winning them at this Mania to get the reaction. It's all good. Like Andre got that run because of, I think it was great that he had that opportunity to have one title run, but the Colossal Connection got the run because the Brainbusters left the company. And I think if the Brainbusters hadn't left the company, they would have held the titles till Mania and Demolition would have beaten them there. Either way, it was all about getting the belts back on Demolition. At this point, they were the most over tag team the company had ever had. Full stop, end of story. I will go to my grave. Anyone wants to argue with me, bring it up. I'll fight you on it till the day I die. The most over team.
In April 1990, there's no doubt about it.
No, and I would argue that I don't think anyone came close to rivaling how over they were until you get to the Attitude Era. And I'll still argue that Demolition were more over than any tag team in that era as well.
And maybe the Outlaws are the closest,
That's what I'm saying, the Outlaws. But I think Demolition were, they just, it was the perfect moment and the perfect situation. I agree. I would see this as a 3.5 star. And look, in ring, Andre can't work. He doesn't get in the ring, really. Haku works the whole match. Haku is a great. I think this match actually shows how good Haku is in the ring.
Amazing, yeah.
But it's a great match, and the moment serves its purpose and got everyone to respond.
And in WrestleMania 4, they did not book Steamboat Savage 2 because they were afraid of the split reaction. And the reason that Hulk and Warrior didn't work as well as they might have liked is because that then happened at WrestleMania 6. There was groans in my section when Hulk lost. This was the moment that everyone in the stadium, everyone in the Sky Dome, it was the loudest pop in the Sky Dome until Jose Batista's bat flip in the 2015 ALDS, okay? It was the biggest moment in the Sky Dome into 2015 in terms of just reaction. Well, okay. Probably got to give the Joe Carter home run to win the World Series in 93. Probably that was a big reaction too. A World Series walk-off home run. But you know what I mean? It took a grand moment to equal that. And incredible night. All right, quickly, the last one. To me, this isn't even a Demolition match. I mean, I suppose it is. The run ends. The run ends. Shout out to my boy Peter Winson when Axe and his goofy hair rolls out the ring at the Survivor Series. That's the end for me.
That's it. And that's the sad thing about the run is this really isn't Demolition. This is Crushers come in at this point.
Yeah.
They don't even get a match against an established team. What's really sad? What would have made this? You want to talk about? Can you imagine if this was the scenario? The only reason Crush came in is because they overreacted to Axe's shellfish allergy.
Yeah,
it's essentially an anaphylactic reaction. It's not a heart attack or anything, but they overreacted and they didn't want to put him back in the ring. But if they had realized, if they had the medical understanding that we do today of, just give Axe a few weeks off, he'd be right, this team could have continued. I honestly think, can you imagine if Demolition had met LOD at this event? Even as it is, they should have wrestled LOD at this card.
Yeah.
But imagine if it was Axe and Smash versus LOD. That would have blown the place off, and you would have been Demolition to be looking at not number 38. They'd probably be up in the 20s.
Yeah, number 20.
If that had the opportunity to happen. And the reality is, because of the heat that came Axe didn't like what happened, Axe leaves the company, and then WWF discovered that Axe actually holds the copyright legal ownership of the name. So that leads to ongoing heat. We never saw Demolition come back for
and then
the nostalgia run.
Part of the concussion lawsuit.
Yeah.
So
we never had them come back for the nostalgia run. I mean, imagine if Demolition had come back in the mid to late 90s as like just a nostalgia run, especially when it was the Body Donners and the Goblins. They could have come back and had another couple of years. Yeah. Everyone else got a comeback. They didn't. That's what we miss out on. But yeah, this match against Tenryu and Fred Katow is just it's a sad end to what was a great run.
I don't even care what you rate it. The ratings here -5, dud 1.75. Whatever. It's not, to me, it's just not Demolition. It's something else.
No.
It's like the Motley Crue album with John Caraba, or whatever. They changed the singer and the band isn't as good. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't get the blessing that AC/DC did when Bon Scott left.
No.
And then, Brian Johnson. There's no Brian Johnson.
That's it.
Crush is not Brian Johnson. Put it in
That's it. That's the advantage of being Australian. You bring an Australian act out, that's what happens. So.
Yes, exactly. So, all right, I think that's it. Any last thoughts sort of on the legacy of Demolition as a WrestleMania tag team?
Yeah, like I said, I think Demolition set a standard. They 3 straight title matches, 3 state title wins. They elevated the tag team division. And really, it didn't get elevated again to this level until the time of Edge and Christian, the Dudleys and the Hardys. And as I shared earlier, only 4 other teams outside of Demolition have appeared in 3 or more tag title matches, and none of them have ever won 3. And Demolition hold that distinction still to this day.
Well, when we did the greatest tag team project for Place to Be Nation a few years ago, I had them at number 1.
I had him at number 1.
I had them Bulldogs and Hearts are 1, 2, and 3. But of course, I lean to this era pretty heavily because Ronda Ripper or whatever. I don't even know who that is. I don't know modern wrestling, so I lean to this stuff and care about this stuff the most. But I think anyone objectively making that list, if you had them lower than 3, you were being disingenuous, in our opinion. So
absolutely,
that's the legacy of Demolition and Mania. There's going to be more. This is the 3rd in a series of 40. I know I'll be back for a few. Dave, you got any others on your
I believe I'm going to get invited back for some more in the future.
Yeah, I have a few down the road, including someone who better be pretty high up. If you know anything about what I do, you know the one I'll be on, and this guy better be pretty high up there, brother, or me and Ryan are going to have some issues. Me and Rock and Ryan's going to hear from the 24-inch podcast guys if there's any problems with these rankings. But anything you want to plug, Dave, before we get out of here?
Look, I'll just plug. I'll plug my 2 shows. Through the Looking Glass, we've just dropped our most recent episode. You can catch that, grab that. That's a good. We've done a couple of what ifs. What if guys had not left the World Wrestling Federation at the time they did, and what their career might have looked like. So check that out. And also along with you and many others. The ChroNoSo journey. Check it out. WrestleMania 5 dropped a couple of weeks ago. We're now starting to prepare to build to SummerSlam 89. So jump on those. Lots of different contributors, and Steve and I are both quite prominent on those.
And I know Dave had mentioned that the next Through the Looking Glass is going to be the first non-wrestling one. They're going to be what if Australia didn't dive in the penalty area at the end of the round of 16 at the 2006 World Cup. And he'll be ready to admit publicly that it was, in fact, the penalty. So we'll end there. That's all for you, Dave, tonight. We'll end there. Check out the 24-inch podcast and, of course, the Sportscasters podcast at sports_casters. You can find everything there. Forza Italia. And we are out. Thank you.